Hello, good morning. Today I'll be talking a bit of MySQL 8. I want to know here, is anyone take a look at it to see how it is? Or it's still like using 5.7? You have? Nice. What do you think? Nice? Yeah, Jason is since 5.7 there, yeah. Yeah. But this version here, what I want to show you here are features that are present on MySQL 8, because a lot of people think you should be using, if you're changing, you should be using Postgres or using a different version. But in reality, you can keep with the same database you're using and just upgrade it. Although you cannot upgrade from 5.6 to 8 directly, you need to upgrade from 5.6 to 5.7 and then to 8. But if you're still doing something new, maybe what I'm going to show you here is going to help you. So I'm Gabi. I work for Google as a developer advocate. My job is to teach developers how to use Google's technology, and in this case, Oracle's technology too. So let's start. MySQL now, they just released a new version last week. It's on version 8.0.16, but it's actually since general available since version 8.0.11. I've been looking at it since 2016, before it even became an alpha or beta, and I'm really impressed. And I've always been a Postgres kind of girl, not a MySQL one, but I'm really impressed with the new features. So a brief history here on MySQL. It was created in the beginning to handle from 10 to 100 megabytes of rows and around 100 megabytes of table. Now supports terabyte size databases. I work with tables with 3 or 4 terabytes inside. Now supports SQL is new as 2016 as the standard. It's the standard. SQL is a language that's in here since 2007, the 70s. So it surprised me that they're keeping up with the new features. But some stuff is from 2003 that just came out now, such as window functions and common table expressions, which I'm going to explain in the future what they are. So what is awesome now? One of the features that captured me, like looking at it more, is this: non-deterministic defaults for table creation. What does it mean? It means that functions and expressions can be created inside your create table. You don't need to have triggers to add default values for your functions or stuff like that. If you're using any document store or any NoSQL database, that means you can have that behavior for UUID support inside MySQL now. You don't need to be using, if you want to use, instead of auto increment for primary key, you can be using UUID. So here is an example of a table users. So it creates, I'm creating the user ID as a binary from the UUID, and I'm adding the created at here automatically. So what this is going to happen is, when I insert a user, it's going to insert the ID automatically for me and the date that I created that user. Now, some business logic sometimes wants us to add features like, oh, I want the login to expire after a year. And I don't know, that happens usually with passwords. You can only set a new link for 24 hours, and you want to know how long it is. So you can create a column like this called expires at, for instance. And this is new. This behavior here is new. You can add an expression, as I said before, or a function. And I'm adding to the current timestamp the interval of a year. It could be any other expression. It could be, if you have an orders table, it could be total times quantity, quantity times price, and you get a total. So that could be, there are any number of use case for that. So the object-oriented approach, we're using a lot of JSON objects inside the database. This is a good feature to have to use UUIDs to your objects. The next feature that changed is the user management. So before I still had to Google every time. Every time I need to create a user, I need to go to Stack Overflow because I don't know the query by head, and because you need to use a grant, and then you create the grant, gives the grant for the database, plus create also the user. Now it a bit changed a bit. You can create roles. So you can create, for instance, a read-only role, a DBA role, a write-only role, and you can create policies around the password. However, the grant, as I said before, doesn't create users anymore. That just changed. And if you're using the 5.7 version, the most updated one, I think it's 5.7.26, you're going to get not an error, but a warning saying that if you create passwords that way, it's going to stop working. You don't need to do flush privileges anymore because you're not manipulating the users table. You're just creating first, and then it's adding for it. And not Googling it all the time to figure out how to do it. So one H create is this. I created a role read-only, and I said that read-only has only access to the database app. That's the privilege. And if you create a user, you can say the Gabriela, and then I create my password. It's only read-only for that. Let's say you have another database you want to see read-only. Instead of having to add the grants again for all the users, you just change the role. You don't need to change everything again to do the same thing. Other changes on the 8th version are regarding to short set and collation. That may affect you in a positive way, actually. Who here uses UTF-8 on the database? Or Latin 1? Or I don't know which collation is better here in Turkey for all your characters because they're different. But that means better support for different characters that are not common on the English language. So on 5.7, we have Latin 1. And now we have UTF-8 and before. I'm going to explain what that means. And it means improvements for that, or mathematical equations, or supplementary multilingual plane. Like, they are doing transcripts from Egypt and that kind of stuff. From old days, and that means supporting that kind of characters inside the database. So the short set, it's what your database can support. The collation, on the other hand, it's how your database is going to compare one data to another. It's how you relate one data to another. So this is the new collation. UTF-8 and before stands for UTF-8, multi-byte string 4. So for each character on the column, you have 4 bytes being used. It's case insensitive and accent insensitive by default. And the 0900 means it's because it's based on the UTF-8 9.0 support. Now you could say, oh, it's a bit outdated because I think UTF-8 is on 11 now. But when they started doing the database in 2016, the 9th was the newest version that they had at that time. There is a bug that would say that the sushi emoji was equal to the beer emoji, and it still is present on 5.7, but not on the 8th version anymore because of this collation. As I said, collation is to compare one data to another. So with this new character setting here, UTF-8, you don't have that problem anymore. If you're using 5.7, unfortunately, you have that problem for now. So other defaults and variables. Binary logging is enabled by default. That's used for replication. So if you need to set up replication now, it's easier. It changed how you do authentication. If you're trying MySQL 8, since just right after they launched, a lot of people had problems with their clients because the client was using the old authentication method, and this new authentication is more secure. Before, who had trouble with the date being zeros, like 0000 and as a year, and 00 as a month, and 00 as a day. That is not possible anymore because when you create a date, not date, but when you create a timestamp now and you put it as a not null, you need to give a default value on the column, else it's gonna fail. Instead of inserting 0 for timestamp or 000 for dates, you need to say what is the default now. So it makes data consistency less of a problem than it was before. And if you're using your server as dedicated for MySQL, and you're not using a cloud provider, and you're using a virtual machine just for a database, you can enable this flag. It comes disabled by default. But if you enable it, it's going to control these 3 variables here that are regarding the buffer, and the log file size and flush methods that's for turning on the InnoDB tables. One cool thing about the 8 is because it's a newer version, it assumes that everybody's using SSD as their disk for the database, which means they already optimized for that. You don't need to worry about like, oh, I'm still using hard drive. How I'm moving to SSD. How I'm gonna do that transition? You don't need to worry about that because the 8 by default assumes you're using SSDs. Indexes. This was a source of anger for me for a while in MySQL because they did not support descending indexes in the beginning. And what does it mean? It's up to 5.7. The syntax allowed you to create ascending or descending indexes. However, when you add it, according to the documentation, only on future extensions that would be supported, not on 5.7. So on 5.7, it's not supported, but currently they are parsed on and ignored there, but on 8, it is available. So that's how I felt when I saw they have finally descending indexes. Descending indexes, because it uses the B-tree algorithm, you don't need to worry if it is descending or ascending. Let's say you want to order by date, and you wanted to order, commonly you do it in a descending manner. And if you need to order in an ascending manner, you don't need to create a new index for that. You just add the new, you just use the index you already have. So if you do a query like this that uses a descending index as I created before, it's gonna have the same cost as ascending because it's using an index that's already created. The database, it's smart enough to figure out, oh, I already have an index for that. I'm just gonna go backwards on that. So that's what it does. And there is a new feature called invisible indexes. And most people would say, I don't see the advantage of that. Why I want an invisible index? So invisible indexes are useful. Let's say, who here had to update a MySQL database with an alter table and took like hours to do it? Same thing happens with indexes because it's an alter table. It's going to take, if you have a big table, it's going to take a while to perform. Well, let's say you have a lot of indexes and your writes are slow and you want to delete it. To delete the index, you need to actually do an alter table. And again, it's going to take a while. But you can toggle it, the index. You can create an index that's not going to be used by the optimizer. It's visible by default. And to change it, you just put the keyword invisible on it. So to toggle the visibility, you just put it alter table invisible or visible. That's a fast operation, takes like milliseconds. The advantage of that, you are able to do stuff like this. Like I'm selecting here users with the username fancy, just adjective. And for now, you can see that the cost here is 0.98, and it gets 1 row. And let's say I want to delete that index for some reason. But before deleting, I want to see what's going to be the performance impact of that. So the performance impact here, just toggling into invisible, it shows me that it scanned 5.04 million rows and a cost of over 500,000. So it's still going to be updated if you insert new rows on the index. But if for some reason you want to, some indexes sometimes are not smart, you want to disable it, that's an option that you have. That feature, it's probably one of the most important ones. Now, if you add a column on MySQL, it's instant. It doesn't take more like 5 hours, 2 hours, depending on the table size, or minutes even. This instant, however, has some caveats. To add columns, you need to be appending to the table. If you say the position of the column, like after email or after username, it's not going to be fast. It's going to be an in-place operation that takes a while. and it must not have a default value on the new column. So if you add a default value on the new column, it's going to rewrite the whole table again. Also, renaming the table is instant now. Modifying columns, columns are already existing to change their default value, for instance, or creating virtual columns and setting up the default or value of a column or not. Also, it's instant too. So this is an example of a table orders that I have. I added a column called total, and I said the total is a decimal, and I'm forcing here that column to be instant, just to guarantee that's going to be an instant add. It took 0.26 seconds, but when I look here, I have over 50 million records for that table. So it was really fast. If it was before that, for the in-place operation, it would take minutes or possibly hours even. Window functions. Who here has used it before, know what it is? OK, nice. So window functions, it's really useful if you want to see, it's also called a bit of analytical queries too. So you can see relationship between the result set that you have. So allows you to analyze the rows that you brought into with your query and see what it's on the neighboring rows, for instance. And you can behave like a group by and have, let's say I have a table orders, and I want to know which was the most expensive order per user. So you can do that without doing any subqueries with window functions. Allows you to use a frame to peek over partition, because the result set doesn't change. It's always going to be the same, but you can add more information on top of it. You're looking over something with a new view, a new, what's it called? I forgot the word. Let's say a new view, but let's keep it at that. So when you look at something and you see something from that angle, you can look at different angles for your result. That's what I meant. So examples, you can add row number. So it's going to enumerate the rows for you from, let's say you have 10 results, it's going to enumerate from 1 to 10. You can have an aggregator result for the rows, and also rank the results. As I said before, I want the top 3 or top 1, and you can rank that. And look at neighboring rows, like I'm going to show you next right now. So I have this column here, orders, table orders, and I have ID, user status. I also have total, but I forgot to put it in here. I'm sorry. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to see I want to see on these orders, I want to see when it was the previous order for each row and the next order. So on this, the second order here, it should show me when I see the previous row, the previous order, I want to see this date, the first line, and on the second line, I'll see the third line as a previous order. So like that. Use the lag and lead functions as a window function, as I said before, to look at the windows that's next to you. So if you look at previous order here, you see the yellow part, the first one is null, because there's no previous order before the first one. It's 0, so it's going to be null. And the yellow one actually corresponds to the first row, because it's looking at the lag one, the before it. And on the blue one is looking actually at the next row, that's the fourth row, to be able to see what's in here. So you can always see stuff from what it's in front of you or behind you. That helps you to see, oh, when it was the last time, what is the average between orders of a customer? Then you can subtract one date from another and see how long it took to see. So instead of having to do a ETL to load into Redshift or even BigQuery to do that kind of query, you can actually do on the MySQL database now. Now, I don't recommend you using that every time, all the time, because it does take a toll in performance, but it helps you on like reports. Sometimes it's useful. So a breakdown of the function is you put the function here, in this case lag or lead, the column that's going to be applied on, And if I wanted the second row, I could have gotten the second row here. By default, it gets the first one. And over, it's like, what is the angle that I'm looking at this? So the angle here is, I want the orders that were ordered by created at. So I'm going to order all on ascending order and get each order that way. I hate repetition, and good things that MySQL developers also don't like it. If you have this kind of stuff, and I'm lazy, I don't like doing stuff twice, so you can do stuff like this. You can have named windows. That way, if you change your window here, your angle, as I said before, you don't have to change your query before. You don't need to change your query. Next one is CTEs, common table expressions. They are actually syntactic sugar, maybe, for subqueries. So every CTE that you create on the database, actually, it's going to come to, when it comes to the optimizer level of the database, it's going to be a subquery, if you look at the query plan. But it helps you to be more readable. So common table expressions, they are similar to create temporary tables, but they don't need to have create privilege. It can reference a CTE, another CTE. So if I have two table expressions, I can use the first one to, the second one to reference to the first. You need to keep the order. They can be recursive, so you can do Fibonacci, for instance, on the database if you want to. I did that, do not recommend. And it's easier to read. So I have an example here, and I'm going to show you next. It's really useful for your hierarchical data. Who here uses WordPress? So you have categories, right? And then the categories can have subcategories, which can have other subcategories. So if you want to get the traversed tree of that, that's a bit complicated. You need to do a lot of queries to get that. With this, you just do one query, and you can get everything at once. It's a subquery. It's fastish. But like, the base query comes first. You need to tell what it is your breaking condition. As any recursion you do, you need to say what it is the breaking condition. The second query comes after a union or union all statement. And the stop condition should be always on the recursive call. That's for MySQL. On Postgres, you can actually put in the outer query. So this is a table that I have in here. They are breeds of dogs or types of plants, flowers or veggies or whatever. And you see here there is a parent category ID, and animal and plant, let's say they are the root. And then dog, for instance, it's the child from animal, and cats also from animal, and so on for each one of them. That's a hierarchical data. So how do you traverse this? First, as I said before, you create the base case. The base case for me, it's where the parent ID is going to be equal to 0, which it is for the animal and plant. And this is going to be a bit much, but I'm going to show. That's the recursive query to traverse that tree. So actually what I'm doing here is I'm getting the tree, and I'm doing an inner join with categories to get the categories that I want. And I'm always saying that the parent, the node ID, the parent category ID is equal to the node ID that I have in there. What it means is, what the database is going to do is it's going to look at the first one, which is 0, and then it's going to look at the child that has the 0, and then the next child that has the 1 or the second one. So it's going to look like this in the end, a traverse tree of the categories. So you can do that on WordPress too. Or Magento if you're using for store or any other kind of hierarchical data. Subqueries are evil, don't do them. But if you must, there is a new tool for you to be using it. Who had done this before? I think most people have. Like, it's a query with a subquery inside. And if you look at the subquery, it's actually the same subquery. I'm just getting ID from this one, and then I'm getting total for this one. So you need to rewrite the query every time you want to take a different information from the table orders and from with users on it, you can do this now. Instead of creating one subquery to each one of the columns that you want, if I want a third column here, like the date of the order, you would have done a third subquery. Now you can use lateral, you say lateral, and you say what are the columns that you want, and you reference here, and once you reference here, you can have access through the queries to have an access to it. So what it means is, it does behave a bit differently than the subquery, because the subquery is going to bring null as a result if it doesn't find the result. But this hides the row that has a null. It's like an inner join. They call lateral join, but it's a bit different than a subquery would be. So this is a diff, actually. For this one, I ran the subquery, and you see here the 2 columns are null because there are no orders for this user. And here, you don't see that the number 2 is not here because that user is not here as a number 2 because there has no orders. So it's behaving like an inner join. So it doesn't find the result. Actually, it doesn't bring anyone from that, which is useful because having to deal this on the validation side of the information, the application, it's a bit complicated from that. So because here, I'm gonna go back. Oh, it's not working. Because here, I want to get I have the table users, and I want to get the orders, the ID of the order for that user, the most expensive order that the user did. So to know which I'm getting from the users, to know which user it is, I'm getting from the users table. But you could get theoretically directly from the orders, but you would have to do an inner join also to know which one it is, the most expensive query, the most expensive order. What this query allows you, it's like not to have to repeat the subquery again when you do a second time. And that allows you not to have to repeat queries all the time, and easier to error that way if you need to change any condition. So it's easier to do this kind of change. I had some live demos to do, but my internet's not working. So I apologize for that. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. And if you have any questions, yeah.
This is a present for best question.
Okay.
Who asks the best question, this gets this plane. This is a present from our sponsor. En iyi soruya bu uçak hediye olacak. Hadi bakalım, bekliyoruz soruları. Buyurun.
Thank you. Questions? So they have a new feature called group replication. It's supposed to make that easier, but I don't know much details about that because I'm not much a DBA. I'm more of a developer, so I'm sorry. I can see and come back to you later. I have a business card. Any more questions? Yes? Wait a moment, he's gonna bring the microphone, I can't hear. On the window functions.
What is the cost of window functions?
Oh, okay. Technically, the cost is not that high because you're not running the query again. Because this, if you do this, when you do this, you actually are looking already on the result set that you bring with or without it. And the cost is going to be of analyzing the result set, not to look at the table or the database to know what it was. So I could run here. I can run after we finish here for you, and we see the cost. I don't know by head, but it's not that big. It depends on your result set, how big it is your result set. And that's going to change because it doesn't change the result set. Anyone else? Yes?
In the beginning, you mentioned that 8 is assumed, developed by assuming everyone is using SSD now. Is there a drawback using hard disk compared to 5.6?
So if he's asking that everybody, it's assuming that is using SSD now, and what is the difference if you're using hard disks? So, yeah. So there is a difference on performance. Actually, 5.7 can be more fast than 8 at sometimes because of the new collation that I showed you before. Because the previous collation assumed that you had 2 bytes character on a varchar, for instance. And this one assumes you have 4. So at least it's lower, 2 times slower if you stop to think about it. So they had to compensate on other stuff. And the SSD is one of them. But you can configure to use hard drive too. It's not that hard. Okay. Anyone else? Yes? So he's asking the speed between UTF-8 and UTF-8 and before. Yeah, it's the new default, yes. So UTF-8 could be faster because, again, it assumes 2 bytes character, not 4. However, you have a problem with, actually, UTF-8 is a bit, I saw a talk that made me scary because a guy was using the database to do, did a JavaScript injection inside the database and was able to do that only because it was UTF-8. If he was using UTF-8 and before, he wouldn't be able to do that because it supports more characters than it does before. So yes, you're going to have a bit back problem with performance, but on the 8 version, you don't see much difference between UTF-8 and TF-8 and before. Can use both. Anyone else? OK, thank you. I'll give it to the person that asked me about window functions. Thank you.